Your LinkedIn is absolutely fantastic because that was actually where I met James, I thought the first time, but actually I have actually met him in a course we did together on microblogging with David Hyde. But I didn't know because it was 20 people and I maybe didn't see it. But then he started writing about his life at Cook and actually what he actually was learning from that. I thought this is super interesting. And I've been observing Cook before because I think it's a maverick business. They're doing some things that's different, not different for the sake of it, but actually because it gives good sense. And that's actually good sense for people, also for the business and the impact they're doing. So I thought we need to have this podcast conversation. So I reached out to James and he said, yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. And we had a conversation and we have actually created a bit of a vision for today's conversation about, of course, we want to understand, Cook's culture. What is it that you do and think when it comes to people leadership, and a bit about what James' role is in all of this. Welcome to the show, James. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, delighted to be here.
And James, for people that doesn't know what Cook does, and who you are and what your role is. Can you just give like a little journey into that? And then we will dive into the more meaty bit around culture afterwards.
Yeah, of course. So Cook, the name isn't always that helpful to people, but we make and sell handmade frozen meals and puddings, actually. And so the whole idea from Cook was kind of based on, if you're of a certain age, you might remember kind of your mum cooking for the freezer back in the kind of 70s or 80s and doing a big batch of chili or beef bourguignon or whatever it was, filling some tubs, ice cream tubs, often they were, empty ice cream tubs, pop them in the freezer. And then, when you're short of time, pull one out, pop it in the oven or the microwave, and there you've got your home cooked meal ready in minutes. And so that genuinely was the seed of Cook for a kind of founder, Ed. That was what his mum used to do when he was growing up. And so that's what he then thought he could make into a great business. So we do that to this day. We're kind of unusual in that we're what we call vertically integrated as a business. So we make all our own food. We truck it around the country in our own lorries, which is a bit mad, but there you go. And we have our own shops, which is now, 105 and counting up and down the country. And so we own everything every step of the way. And I think that's a big part of who we are and how we are, if you like, in the world, taking on the responsibility, as it were, for as much as possible. And so everything is frozen, which people always go, what, everything? Yeah, everything is frozen. And everything, well, nearly everything, I say, cooks from frozen. Some things don't cook from frozen. So we're just in the run-up to Christmas. We do a turkey. We do a full kind of Christmas lunch. But the turkey you do have to defrost. So you buy it frozen, but then you defrost it. There's brilliant turkey from wonderful Paul Kelly over in Suffolk. They're all kind of bred in woodlands out in East Anglia before they come to our freezers. So the whole idea is just home-cooked food straight from the freezer and bringing that, if you like, convenience at home. So you don't have to pick up the phone and call Deliveroo. You can just open your freezer door, pop it straight in the oven or microwave. There, is that enough of a sales pitch about that?
Yeah. And I think it's really good. And I think now people are starting also, okay, I've seen that actually both, online. I've seen the shops. You might be into a shop, but also you've probably seen it on stations, because I've seen you popping up now at the train station as well for the busy commuters as they are running home.
Yeah. We're experimenting with a few different things. So we've got a couple of freezers in a shop just in London Bridge Station in there for those kind of busy lines. And we've actually this year experimenting with vending. So again, quite an unusual thing to do, kind of a frozen meal from a vending machine. So we've got a couple of vending machines in stations, seeing how that goes. So that's kind of exciting. Just different ways that you can get your product to people when they might need it.
Yeah. And I love the whole thing, and this about, proper meals in the freezer is all about, better health for the nation as well. Like, and when you're busy, so you don't end up with junk food and really over processed food. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so we our big kitchens. If you ever want to come and visit, have a look around, because people always kind of come out with these wide eyes. Wow, I couldn't believe it was actually like you said it was going to be. And it is just lots of people cooking. And I
Yeah.
kind of think of it like if you've ever been into a big hotel kitchen or even on a cruise ship kitchen, where it's kind of that sense of clear stations that go through. For us, it's just big rooms. So from the prep kitchen where they're doing all the slicing and dicing, through into the chefs who cook in like big steam heated saucepans, big ovens, obviously. Then we have a mix and weigh station where products that need mixing, together are done. And then essentially everything is assembled down a much more conventional production line, in the sense that you've got somebody or a line of people making a lasagna each layer at a time on a conveyor belt, then into blast freezing, kind of minus 30 degrees, and then out and done. But it's quite a thing to behold when you see it. And again, the chefs are genuinely doing it like you would at home, just on a grand scale. So it's 1,500 portions around that at a time. But they'll be tasting, they'll be making sure it's just right, and their name goes on the label of every batch they cook. So it's kind of responsibility. It's few of us have our name on a product. So when you do, I think you do take that sense of pride a bit further.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you about that, because of course I had to go, and because I like to cook, so it's not like I don't buy convenience, but I actually had, of course, to buy one of your products, and I actually noticed there was a name on, and I've seen that, a company like Hygienes is the same. You have the name on there as well. You have it from some chocolate producers where you can see who has actually produced this chocolate on that day. Escanochi chocolate in the US have this as well. So yeah, I just wanted to ask, is that actually the person that put the meal together? And that makes it really, you feel like it makes it real, and as you say, there's actually people standing in the kitchen cooking food here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Real people with their hands cooking food. But your role, James, you are, chief creative officer. And the first time I heard that, I think, what the heck is actually that role in the food business? I have a very rare role in general, but especially in the food business. If you're a creative agency, it was different, but this is now also a food business.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, I guess we like to think we have our own creative agency inside Cook, and in a way, that's the bit I run. And so, I think, thankfully, for everybody's sake, I'm not involved in creating the food, which everybody can breathe a big sigh of relief. But I do, so I think of my role as three things, really. There is the classic kind of customer-facing creative bit, so the brand comms, that kind of stuff. Then there's, if you like, the internal culture side of things, which I'm heavily involved with. And then there's, if you like, the strategy of the business. And so those three things actually fit together pretty well. So I kind of think of the natural course of it is kind of strategy, culture, customer, if you like. And it should be quite a nice virtuous circle. And if you can get those things in harmony and kind of that circle getting momentum into your flywheel, as it were, that really works well. And that's definitely one of the things I would say, learned at Cook over the years is how to seek to translate strategy to culture to customer in a way that's going to actually make a difference and help us get to where we want to go.
And you've been, and then we're going to come back to that because that's super interesting. But you've been, your background is actually you've been with Cook for more than a decade. Is that correct? And you did something very different before.
Oh, completely. Yeah. This was kind of my second career in that sense. Yeah. So I came out of university and became a journalist, and was writing about business and finance, and so did that for more than a decade, and loved it for the most part. I mean, being a journalist is a wonderful job. You get paid to go out and meet people. So that's literally what you're paid to do. It's wonderful. How fantastic. So it was a huge amount of fun. And then I'd kind of moved out of London down into Kent and to the village where Ed, who's the founder of Cook, he happened to live. Family a similar age, kids are similar ages, so we just got to know each other socially. And one night down the pub, he said, "Oh, I was wondering, do you want to come and work for Cook?" And it was like, "Whoa, doing what?" And he kind of said, "Well, kind of, I don't know, communications. Isn't that your kind of thing? You're a journalist." And so anyway, so it all kind of went from there, really. And that was kind of 2010. So just coming out of the credit crunch, which had been really tough, really tough for Cook. As Ed would say, as close to going bust as you can get without actually going bust. And in a way, I think we were at the time on the Royal Bank of Scotland, kind of had a loan with them, but they were having such a shit show that nobody knew where anything was. So luckily, they never called us up to ask us why we hadn't paid our bit. So were it not for the shit show that Fred Goodwin had kind of brought into being at Royal Bank of Scotland, who knows where we'd be. But yeah, we made it through, lived to tell the tale. And yeah, here we are today, whatever it is, 130 million sales we'll have this year, I think. And as I said, 105 shops, 1,000 odd concessions, actually more like 1,500 concessions, and a few vending machines for luck.
It's fascinating. Everybody has these stories where, when you look from the outside, you never think, but everybody has a time where everything was critical on the edge, and there's just one thing that makes sure it doesn't tip over. It just balances it all out, and it's all fine after that. And lots of listening to it. But coming back to, you said something really interesting, that your role is to facilitate, first strategy, then culture, then customers. How would you describe culture at Cook, if you should put words on it? Because this is how you facilitate it, I guess. You start with strategy, then culture, then the customers. But how would you describe the culture at Cook for people that has never been really inside what's happening?
So again, culture at Cook is pretty unusual because, as I said, is as if you're like a vertically integrated business. So I'd like to say we've got like all of humanity under our roof, because we've got classic blue collar kind of environments. We've got retail at the other end, classic kind of shop environments. Then we've got all those central functions in between, from marketing to finance to whatever. So the diversity of people we have is pretty broad. And so the role of culture in a company like that is it is ultimately the secret ingredient that makes Cook work. Without the culture, all we do is make a lasagna, and the recipe for lasagna is no secret. Anybody can make a recipe for lasagna. Do you know what I mean? So there's in that sense, there's no great secret in what we're doing, but the way we do it, how we do it, and why we do it is what makes everything click and everything work. And that is definitely the secret ingredient to what we do. And I guess culture for us all kind of boils down to relationships, and the idea that really at the end, all a business is, or any organization, is a bunch of people coming together to do something that they couldn't do on their own. That's all it is. And if that's true, which we believe it is, then what's going to make that work is the relationships between those people. That's where the power really lies. And if you can get those relationships really humming and singing, then the collective is going to be so much more powerful, so much more impactful than the sum of its parts. And at the same time, like, relationships are something you very rarely hear talk about in any kind of work context. And which is just interesting, isn't it? It's, when all we're doing is people stuff, and yet when do we ever sit down and talk about a relationship and how our relationship and how is it going? How could it be better? And we kind of had this insight, I guess, more than 10 years ago, partly driven by reading or coming across the Harvard Grant study, which you might have come across, because there's a great TED talk, quite famous these days, but it was this kind of the longest running survey of human flourishing, I guess, which started in 1938, Harvard University, with a biannual survey of about 250 men. It was all men at Harvard at the time. And they just agreed to sign up every 2 years. They would sit down and have an interview about how their life was going. And so this has been running since then. I think there's like 1 or 2 people left still alive. It's had a few iterations since. But so it's the longest running study of human flourishing. And what that found over all those years, people who succeeded, people who failed, people who did well, people who did all these kind of things. But the big finding was, at the end of the day, the one thing that defines human happiness and flourishing across a lifetime is the strength of the relationships. And so what life boils down to is like the relationship we have, the human context, the connection. Then that's going to be true about business as well. That's going to be true about the workplace. It's going to be true about our organization. How do we really focus on strengthening those relationships, making them as powerful as they possibly can be, and taking that then into this thing we call a business, which is all about achieving something we want to do together. So it begins and kind of ends with relationships in that sense.
And it's really interesting because there's another thing. I think you're absolutely right. Relationships, and there's another book. There's from Harvard as well. I don't know if you've read this, called The Service Profit Chain. And
No.
actually it talks about the quality of relationship between, different parts of an organization. And it's principle about building culture, because the service culture, you need really relationships. And about 18 months ago, I also had a guy called Mike Hohen on the podcast, and he's very much into, he's really big believer in the service profit chain. So he's been traveling around Europe, teaching organization in how do you actually, build a great organization from the service profit chain. And it really boils down to, often problems or success is relationship connected.
Yep.
And the quality of these relationships that is within an organization or with your stakeholders, if you're your suppliers as well. And often we forget that actually success, we look at the results we create, but not so much of what relationship to actually make those results happen, and what is the quality of these.
Yeah.
So I think it's super spot on. It's very, very interesting, and I will definitely put that study in the show notes. And if I can find it, please share it with me, James.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's super interesting. What about, I was thinking about when you say, relationship, what about, energy then? Is that also important? Because again, the quality of relationship also means, do you give me energy or you take energy from me? I often believe.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, energy, I think we would say that it's important, but it's not, we're not focusing on the energy because that's an outcome of the relationship as well. So let's do the foundational work around how we are together. And we think of that, we have a kind of what we call our big relationships model. And this, we worked with a lovely lady called Elizabeth Lovius on this, again, going back more than 10 years. And this idea that, look, if you've got a big ambition and you want to create big results, you need to have big relationships, which is a lovely way of thinking about it. And the kind of three ingredients we boiled it down to were unity, clarity, and appreciation. And so you kind of, you can do that in a lovely little three circle Venn diagram. Like all the best things in the world can be drawn in a three circle Venn diagram, basically. And kind of the unity part is usually where we begin. Where are we united? Let's get really clear on where we agree. And often, when you're kind of diagnosing relationship issues or problems you might have at work, start on that unity bit, not with a sense of picking apart the things you don't agree on, but start with the things you do agree on. Start on a bit of strength, on solid foundations, then build out from there. So there's a unity bit. The clarity bit is really the classic, more of the organizational structural side of things. So real clear roles, responsibilities, accountabilities. Are we really clear what each of us is doing, what each of us is bringing? And then the appreciation bit is the really human need to be seen. And so are we both appreciating what each of us is bringing to this relationship, but also acknowledging that by kind of what we call public displays of appreciation. And again, one of the simplest things that anybody can do is offer some heartfelt appreciation of a colleague. And so finding ways you can do that, giving people, opportunities to do it in a public sense is incredibly powerful. Interestingly, I was telling a friend about this who's a doctor. And so he said to me, look, in the NHS, like appreciation just doesn't exist. Nothing like that ever gets done. And so, he said he'd give it a go. So he went back to his surgery and had a team meeting a couple of weeks later and did an appreciation exercise I'd given him. And he said it was just like, if there's not tears, you haven't quite done it well enough. But there were tears in the room. And he said, but what was so interesting at the same time was literally said a couple of people just couldn't cope with it because it was way too out. It was too far outside their comfort zone from one world to another.
It's like a systemic shift.
Yeah, absolutely. So to have suddenly somebody appreciate you it can be just an amazing experience. So yeah, appreciation. Can't do it too much.
So in principle, what you're saying is that to actually, you knew what kind of culture you wanted to create, but to do that, actually, you systemize things to actually have an approach you could actually implement down on a daily level.
Yep.
With actions.
With that, and so a few things kind of came together at the same time. So we had, if you like, this driving force around relationships, which is really strong. at the same time, we'd got to a stage kind of about 12 years, 13 years into Cook, of being at that classic size where you're now too big for if you like the founder or the kind of senior team to meet every new person who starts a job. And so what do you do at that point? What do you need? Well, the classic things, you need to have some things written down to make it clear the kind of people you're after. So articulating values came then. But interestingly, that was like 13 years into the business that we actually articulated values. And I think those two things together really created the foundation of the culture we have today, because they made really clear that we're all about relationships, gave people a way to understand what that means. And they made really clear what our shared values were that we kind of uphold and expect people to uphold. And so the values part of it is something that we do really intentionally. So, we reward people on values. We acknowledge people, across the company regularly. We have values nominations where you nominate somebody else for showing up, putting one of the values into action, as it were, living the values. And we keep that really live, something that's got to be lived rather than just written down and put up on a wall. So I think those two things together have been the real difference over the last 10 years or more.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to underline, it's really interesting because I've heard that from others as well. And lots of people think they need to come up with this, this system you've created now. It actually builds slowly by slowly, and often is not in place from day one. It comes when the need is there. As you say, you grow to a certain size, or there's some kind of ceiling you need to break through from a revenue point of view, and you find out actually it's the leadership mechanisms we need to change, and we need to put some systems in for culture. And I think it's the same from any business I've interviewed with a great culture. Exactly, it comes slowly by slowly, and we're building these systems and processes for it. And how does this, because one thing I talk about this is lovely, but how big a role does this play in your competitive advantages in a very competitive market? I would say, hyper competitive. The ready-meal business.
Yeah. I've always thought of Cook as a people brand, so we call it a people brand. I think this is true for like many businesses in the hospitality sector. I would also say they're kind of people brands, and kind of I define that as, so it's people. Begin with the people. Keeping a promise, so getting really clear what your brand promise is. What are you going to deliver for a purpose? So be driven by something, beyond just the financial gain, through shared values, so other people feel moved to choose us. And so, people to people, those are either end of that. And so, if you think of yourself as that's what matters. People have got to deliver something, and ultimately you've got to just see that culture, the relationships, as the key differentiator that you're going to have, the way you do it, that's going to enable you to differentiate yourself from somebody else. So I think for us, it's just everything comes from that belief that actually, if we can come together as a group of people and do something special, create that bit of magic, that's what's going to differentiate us as a business and a brand from all the similar kind of people trying to do similar kind of things.
And is there any like tangible ways you've seen like that you're working with culture in this very focused way that actually there's come some like, it doesn't have to be sales per se or profit, like, really influence the way you can operate and how you can react in the business environment? Because I often think culture is really to make the implementation happen of a very high standard. That's often how I see it. And then the results comes after that.
No, I think that's true. You see it most often, I guess, sometimes in times of crisis. So clearly, kind of response to things like the pandemic were just off the charts in terms of how people stepped up and what they did. You definitely see it in times when you're trying to introduce big change into the business or do something differently. That's a really interesting time for culture, because it can be both a real strength and a challenge, because you're kind of perhaps there's tension in there in terms of what the change you're trying to make is. So it's hard. I mean, because it runs so deep through what we do, it's pretty hard to pull things out. I think opening shops is a good example. So opening any kind of in a new store, any kind of new space of your business can be challenging, and particularly, clearly nothing opened over COVID. So we went from not having done anything for quite a few years to suddenly wanting to do a bit more. So getting some shop openings back up and running, and that's an area where if you haven't got that cultural strength within the business, the way that shop opens just isn't going to work. You've got to somehow be able to bottle it and have the people who can come and bottle it, hire the team, put everything into practice in a completely new location in a way that's going to work. And I think we've done that really successfully now since COVID. The last 2 years probably been our best ever succession of shop openings. I would say we must have done about 10 in the last couple of years. And I think that's a real benefit of a strong culture, being able to pick it up, plant it in a new location with completely different people, often very new people, and yet still see the same experience for the customer be delivered, even though many things around it are completely different. I think that kind of is evidence of a good, healthy, strong culture at play.
Yeah, because there is this wisdom that's brought forward about how you did it, but then probably also adapted. And you can only do that with strong culture. I totally agree. And then opening a shop is like extending your culture into the unknown, because you can't see what's happening every day. It's a shop that's far away from the center of the organization in a way, and that's really where culture comes to life in any organization. What is it that you're talking? I think I took it actually from a post you did on LinkedIn. You talked about leading from the front line. What does that mean to you or to Cook? And because that's a really difficult leadership style. I know that from a hospitality background. Leading from the front line is quite demanding for you, because it means you need to be in the front line all the time. And you just told us the business is quite diverse and all over the country in many different locations.
And I would, so in this respect, completely, I would kind of take my hat off completely to Ed and Rosie, who are co-CEOs, their brother and sister as well.
Yeah.
Because I think they do it phenomenally well. And they, so this week, one of our busiest weeks in the shop of the year, they're spending the vast majority of this week, 3 or 4 days visiting shops, just getting around as many shops as they can to see people in their busiest time, to, give them a bit of a lift, give them a pat on the back, what have you, which is fantastic. I think they also go around our kitchens every week, go and see them in action, make sure you're talking to the people. And I think one of the really powerful things they did was post-pandemic. So again, clearly for everybody, the pandemic is an incredibly stressful situation. Big kitchen's no different.
No,
but trying to understand the position the kitchens were in, they just put on a series of dinners through the whole year. I think it's been 2021 or 22. I can't remember now. Where they got the team leaders from all the kitchens just to come to dinner with them and just talk about what was going on. How are they feeling after 2-3 years of complete stress? Where are the issues that they saw? And just to reconnect in a way and show them that they really wanted their input, valued their input, would sit them down around a table and have a dinner together at a restaurant. Big time commitment, but really important. So I think they really bring that to life in quite inspiring ways, and very influenced by John Timpson, who wrote a book called, I want to say, Dear James, which are letters to his son, James Timpson, obviously now, whatever he is, Lord Timpson, and which very much kind of promoted servant leadership and the idea of bottom up, or reversing the triangle of the hierarchy. And I think, it's just a no-brainer, isn't it? And what's I think what I saw recently, which really brought it to life, was was at a very basic level. It was my son, who's now kind of 20 and doing odd jobs here and there. And he was working at a vineyard. Locally, I'm in Kent, so we have lots of vineyards around us. And he was doing bottling wine. And he just came home one day, been there a few weeks, and says, "You know what? My team leader, they just always go at 5 o'clock every day. We're there till 6, and they always leave. Not a word." And so you just see from, if someone's experience of their work is that their leader, their boss, isn't willing to put in the same effort, the same time, whatever that they are, then immediately you've lost them. So it's a basic thing, isn't it? So
It's quite interesting. I had an interview that went live recently with Ari Weinswijk from Singermans, and we actually talked about servant leadership and exactly that ability at, leadership is that you're the one that gives more than you take. And,
Yeah.
it's like, you were there and I asked him, what do you do then? You're thinking like he's the CEO of 750 people. He goes they have a restaurant, where he goes, I think it was 3 or 4 times a week. He goes and pour waters to guests to talk
Wonderful.
with guests and staff,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
and he called it leadership by pouring water. And then by him doing that, his partners in the business, which are the mid-manager directors, do the same. And they don't all pour water, but they have their own version of it. So they create this like theme about, actually it's important to spend, majority of half of your time out there in the front line, just talking with people. And you don't know what you're going to get out of it. And I think often that's been forgotten in leadership in the more top-down model. But actually by doing that, lots of people want that engagement from the bottom. Yeah, but then if you want the engagement from the bottom, you need to go out and participate in the work. It doesn't mean that you don't have to make strategic decisions and all that, but actually you're much better informed when you make those decisions doing that. And that's servant leadership in its nutshells in a way. It's not like some kind of saying the right word or anything. It's actually being there and being in service and available. I think I've worked in lots of change and some change, or with some in the hospitality business, there's been availability that has been huge, and others where you couldn't find where the CEO was.
Right. Yeah. I think there's an interesting study done. This is going back into the 80s around different styles of culture in Silicon Valley. I don't know if you've heard of this. This was done, I think it was by Stanford, and they kind of identified 5 different types of kind of culture that were working at that time. And there was a star culture, which is obviously just get the best talent, get them in, pay them loads, what have you. There was an autocratic culture, which is obviously there's a boss or a founder and they run with a kind of rod of iron type thing. A kind of bureaucratic culture, where it's all about policy and procedure. An engineering culture, which is very much about kind of technical brilliance.
Yeah.
And then a commitment culture, which is all about emotional connection between people and between people and the company. And so they studied them for about a decade, and surprise, surprise, the commitment culture far outperformed the others. And I heard this line from somebody. It was a big CEO, and I can't remember who it was, but he was saying, what he always does when he's going around his business is think about, is what I'm going to say going to increase or decrease commitment of the person I'm talking to?
Wow. Yeah.
And which is a really powerful, when you think about it. If that ran through your mind every time you were talking to somebody, you probably wouldn't say some of the things you end up saying, because it's just that recognition that what matters more than anything is their commitment to the job. And okay, I might be able to see something that I think isn't right or that they could improve or what have you, but is me saying it going to increase their commitment? And if it's not, then just don't say it, keep your mouth shut. Which I think is a really interesting kind of way of thinking around, look, commitment is what really counts. So how do you foster commitment in your people?
It was quite interesting. Very early on in my career, I had a very good boss, and he was going around with me. He was the owner and I was his ops director, and we were traveling around. And then there was an employee came to me and said, "Oh, Michael, the coffee machine is broken down again." I said, "Not again, it's going to cost a fortune." And then he pulled me to the side, and he didn't say it was a commitment. He said, "How committed," or he said, "How engaged do you think that employee is after your reaction like that?" "Oh, right. I was just frustrated. It was not a cost, Yeah, but employees they don't care about that. So actually, your only answer is, okay, let's get it fixed. Do you have a plan for it? And that's it. And the rest you just have to. Because I was like really a wake up call, and I never seen it like that. And that was why I think, oh, this is super interesting. Are you actually increasing or decreasing commitment? Because that's what you're doing. You're killing the energy. Or
absolutely,
like, is it my fault now? Is it? And they can perceive it in so many different ways. They might not, but they can perceive it in so many different ways. I thought it was super interesting. James, on that journey of like, you defined your culture, you brought it to life, you found these systems. Is there like any things you do on a regular basis that really keeps it alive over time? Because it evolves, I guess.
Yeah, it evolves for sure. And I think being open to that is is interesting. Accepting that it needs to evolve, particularly if you're in a growing business. The things, the things that make it work when you're perhaps one size don't work so well when you're double the size or triple the size in terms of people or what have you. So, I don't know how I can turn it off. So I think it's got to keep evolving. It's got to keep changing. So we're always trying to think about what do we need to move forward with? How do we need to push this on a bit? That's a constant work in progress. I think that the big thing that we seek to do is definitely get people together. So I love this little phrase. I don't know if you've heard it, of collective effervescence. Have you come across that?
No, I've never heard about that.
A lovely little expression, collective effervescence. And this is from sociologist Emil Durkheim back at the start of the 20th century, I think it was, early 20th century. And he came up with this idea that actually within any culture or community, the gathering of people together results in something a bit intangible that he called collective effervescence. So but it's essential to connecting people in a community. And I definitely think that's true. And so for us, having big events, getting people together as regularly as possible, trying to generate that collective effervescence. You can feel it in a room when people leave, that there's a bit of a buzz around there. They go back to their kind of jobs, buzzing. So that's a really important thing. And it can be something as basic as common with many companies. We do a big all company meeting on a Monday, 2:30. It's got 2:30 huddle, no more than half an hour. But that is a collective effervescence exercise. It's all about how do we create buzz and energy in the business to take us through the week ahead. And then doing big kind of more showpiece kind of overnight events for people. But that's where we found there's a real ability to almost shift the culture a bit forward. So if you're really trying to make a step forward, get everybody together, get them doing things together, get them experiencing what you want the culture to be like, really exploring it themselves, and then send them kind of back out into the world with some clear kind of next steps to take. So that would be, I think, the big thing for us.
It's like rituals you plan over the years. You already know every week you have a ritual, but that's how it's been like bringing people to the church in a way.
No, it is. And I think that rhythm, I mean, we think of it often as a rhythm or cadence of meetings and how what your year works is actually really important, because people do get into a rhythm there.
Yeah.
And they kind of feel their way into it. And so we have a rhythm around kind of, again, working from strategy to culture to customer, as it were, that starts kind of with first quarter kind of bigger picture, blue sky strategy thinking, that we try and get input from everybody in the business, that then gets kind of narrowed down and refined a bit over the second quarter with some big kind of company meetings in there. That again, it's a kind of narrowing into, okay, so what are we really going to focus on in the third quarter, looking 12 months ahead or 3 years ahead? Where is our real focus? Into, if you like, the fourth quarter, right, the budget, the action plan, the objectives, the priorities, launch and back into that cycle. So I think that rhythm can actually really, really help if you're trying to create, again, a sense of momentum and a sense of energy in a business, and a sense of everybody knowing their opportunities to feed in, as it were, to that process.
And it's very interesting. The thing with is the word rhythm is something I used in the later years. Before I really used the word, I still use the word consistency. But some of the most successful organization, and most people know I have a background from McDonald's, but really what it was about, it was creating rhythm in that organization. And there was similar rituals as you talk about, like from how a business week or day looked like. And I was once part of a cafe chain, and we created the wheels because we were very much committed to the good to great philosophy of wheels. The wheel was wheels on the bus, and we were driving the bus as leaders. And this wheel was a good day, or good months. And you could see as a leader, you can turn this wheel on the wall and you could see these are the rituals or tasks that needs to be done to keep the momentum for the 20-mile march, we called it. And it's also from and I think lots of people, as they build businesses, forget exactly that's your job as the leadership team, is to create the systems for that rhythm. It's not finance systems. Yes, you need finance systems. Yes, you need marketing systems. But really, this is where it all comes together, and actually where the soul of the business grows. And you're preparing yourself for a crisis, as you mentioned before, because then you can keep on doing that maybe slower, but you're at least moving forward 1% every day instead of going in a gridlock because people don't know what rhythm are we actually normally doing to build this. You call it a people brand, but I think most food and hospitality business are a people brand because
Yeah,
else the
absolutely.
food will not
Yeah.
taste nice.
Yep.
It will be the quality of the food will probably determine the quality of the relationship they have, I often say as well. So
Yeah.
I love that. So we're just combining a couple of things. I just wanted to put that on. That was my reflection.
No, love it. Yeah.
Um, and how do you actually, again, because we already talked a bit about the rhythm. One of the things I call it cultural consistency as well. We talked a bit about that. But is there you talked about servant leadership before. Is there if you had to name some key leadership principles you operate from, you're leading from the front line was one of them. Is there others you use to actually, because, the day-to-day leadership is also, in my view, really feeding or cultivating the soil of a culture?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think, and again, so what we've tried to do is put all our leadership through our values lens. So we have 5 values: be remarkable, care, be part of our family, have fun, and Churchill's pig. And so our leadership structure and framework is built around those 5 values. And again, just seeking to always be consistent these are values that we think define how we want to be together as a community. Let's make sure that's how we're leading as well. So just having as much clarity as we can around those. Again, something that we've come to quite recently, and partly a function of growth and size. I think the need to make that much clearer for people. What do we expect, in terms of your leadership at different levels of the organization? So we essentially have kind of 5 levels of leadership with clear expectations in terms of how you're going to lead through the values at each of those levels.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, and again, it shows you that when the organization increases, you also need to have system to facilitate, because it's different. You want the values to bring to life, but it's different things you need to do from a director to a frontline manager.
Yeah,
so totally get that.
Absolutely. And again, I think actually one of the questions you had, so I'm going to answer it now, was what would be my learning of the last couple of years, as it were. And I think my learning is as a more, if you like, creatively type of person who doesn't necessarily like structure and lots of process. I've definitely learned that as a business grows, you've just got to bring it in. You've got to have enough structure and process to enable you to thrive and flourish. And the bigger you get, probably the more you need. And the art of it is clearly not then bringing in too much that you stifle, if you like, the creative side of things or the human side of things. So, just enough process. But my learning would definitely be, actually, we can give people a bit more structure, and that will enable them to thrive, actually, rather than constrain them. Lots of people need a bit of structure to know exactly where they're heading, what they're doing, the boundaries within which they can work. And if you don't give it to them, often things will get chaotic. So that would be my big learning of the last couple of years.
I love that, because also we are totally sometimes underestimate actually that, there's a lot of talk about, bottom up leadership or no managers or, and I don't think I have the right answer. I think every organization need to find their algorithms for that, or they need, all the top leaders need to be the alchemist of what's right for that organization, because you can go and ask the employees, they feel it's great to be there, then you have found the right alchemist. No, majority of employees, I would say. How do you find, are you an organization that is trying to push decision power out to the front line, or you are there needs to be some top down because you're dealing with compliance, food safety, and so on? Because that often, I think there's a dilemma there in my view. And I don't have the answer, but I definitely can see that dilemma.
It's definitely a balance, isn't it? I think, and for us, that's definitely true. Again, I think it's one of those interesting kind of growth issues you go for in terms of how much do you seek to push to the front line. Do you end up being too late because you're so used to keeping it, as a smaller organization, keeping it quite tight, and then suddenly you wake up one day and realize, oh, whoa, we can no longer do that. That doesn't work. So I think it is quite an interesting balance to try and strike. I think this is perhaps where, again, just being really frank, we've maybe erred on the side of freedom as an entrepreneurial type of culture, and we probably might need to move a bit more into the process space in terms of as you get bigger, having that acceptance that if you want to give people great experiences, you need to make sure the processes are right, and therefore that's still a decision made. You should be clear that's still decisions made on the front line.
Yeah.
But do they have the process to enable them to make that decision in the best way consistently each time? And if we haven't given it to them, then that's probably our fault, not theirs.
Yeah. And I think, all great organizations as they grow will do that. Then the question is just about how do you facilitate and what kind of relationship do you have?
Absolutely.
It all come down to that.
Yeah. So hopefully you get a virtuous circle where you're respecting the relationship whilst bringing in a bit more structure.
What are you excited about right now? As you said, it's been some challenging years.
Who knows where we'll go in 25? Yeah, who knows what will happen? What's exciting? So, except we're bringing out a cookbook next year, which is great. So that's going to be fun. That'll be our first one. So looking forward to that getting published in the summer. I'm kind of excited. I'm evolving my role a bit. So I'm kind of going to spend a bit less time at Cook, go down to kind of 3 days a week at Cook doing chief strategy role, and then doing other things in those other 2 days, kind of going out and working with a handful of other businesses on kind of similar things that we've done, and seeing how I can help them kind of take themselves places that we've been. So that's going to be exciting.
Great, exciting. So the whole new venture coming in next year. What would your advice be to other leaders out there? Because I think people that will listen into this conversation, they are already on the journey. They want to build a business as a force for good, like Cook is doing. But what would your top advice be on that journey? Because you actually been in some very formative years of Cook's journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we were one of the very first certified B Corps in the UK, and that's kind of more than 10 years ago now. And so we kind of definitely sought to take that movement and make it work in the UK, which is fantastic. What the job that everybody else has done with that is phenomenal. There's now over 2,000 and counting B Corps in the UK, biggest community outside the US. But that would be an interesting lesson for anybody. Is like find the others. Like, who's your community? If you're genuinely seeking to be a business as a force for good, or a business that's doing more than just generate profit, then who are your fellow travelers? Who can you get together with? Because there'll be hard yards, and you need other people to cajole you along, to learn from, to encourage you, to hold you to account. So definitely find the others would be my first thing, I think. And then also just accepting there will always be tension. So the objectives of the business, the world is set up, the capitalist system is such that there can't not be tension between that system and one that whatever you're trying to do that isn't just driven by profit. And so just accept that tension. Don't kind of beat yourself up about it, and just make the best decision you can in the moment that's true to you. Don't kind of agonize over it. Don't give yourself a guilt trip. Just do the best decision you can, accept the tensions there, and move forward. Just keep moving forward. As long as you're being true to your principles, make decisions in that way. But it's not easy. Not easy.
But funny enough, what I've heard both people that's been on the show, but also what I've seen myself, is that when you do that, then suddenly you take a leap at some point and you actually get closer to that. But it came, a bit like farming. It came suddenly. You've done all these right things, but you didn't. You felt you were doing compromises, but actually you were moving yourself to the right place, and then suddenly you're there, and then you've actually done the thing you want to do from an impact point of view. But also you need to survive to do impact. I always say.
I think, and that's the truth of the matter is, profit is your oxygen. Without it, you're going to suffocate, and you can wish it was otherwise, but that's the fact of the matter. So just accept it and get going. Yeah.
I love that, James. What is the one question you wished I asked you today, and what is the question, and what would you answer?
Favorite line of poetry?
Oh, good one, yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know if this is from a poem or not, but it's from a poet, and it's Seamus Heaney. He's a wonderful poet, many great poems. But the line which I came across actually in just an article about him, which I love, is the way we are living, timorous or bold, will have been our life.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful bit of poetry to take forward with you into 2025.
Now we go live with this in 2025, but it's still January, so there is
absolutely
good questions or quotes that makes you really deeply reflect about if you are on the right journey or you need to calibrate a bit to take the right action.
And senses, are you living in a bold way?
Yeah,
because that's all you've got.
Yeah,
that's what the sum will be at the end of the day.
My dad always said, "You only have one shot." So. Do your best.
The cliches are cliches because they're true.
That's true. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to do. Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more about your work at Cooked, or they want to hear more about your interesting thoughts about how to build culture and strategy? Where was the best place to find you?
So LinkedIn is the best place for me. So just James Rutter Cook. I should appear. Yeah, I tried to post something vaguely useful every week. So you can tell me how well
it's very useful. I think it's really, if you want to reflect on, your leadership and your strategy and your culture, I think that's James is one to follow. I was about to say that. And we'll put that in the show notes, and we'll put Cook's website if people can't find that. We'll put that in the website as well. And if you could share the TED talk as well, we'll put that in there. I think that's be really, really interesting.
Of course.
It's been super interesting, and as always, when you're into something really meaty, times just go too fast. But thank you so much for coming, James, and thank you for your huge contribution to the community. I wish you a good holiday when you get there, and power and energy for the time ahead for you and the team at Cook.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Right back at you, and thank you for the pod, because it's a great pod, and everything you do is just bringing value to the world. So top job.
Thank you very much, James.